And we are in for the Charles Schwab Colonial. How you doing, Andy Lack? What's going on, man?
I'm great, man. I'm excited for Colonial. Obviously, pretty tough act to follow up last week. It was one of probably the most memorable. I'll probably remember that one for the rest of my life, just as a fan. So, tough act to follow, but I'm super excited for this tournament.
You know what? And we can briefly touch on that. I mean, that was just amazing. I mean, after day one, we're all like, okay, we've seen this act before, right? And I see a lot of chatter on Twitter saying, okay, all right, let's see what happens. Let's see if he goes out and shoots at 80 on the second day. And sure enough, he played well. He played together 4 solid rounds. He deserved to win this championship by far. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, he was one of the best ball strikers in the field, if not the best ball striker in the field for 4 rounds. You can't fake your way into a 72-hole golf tournament and a major nonetheless. So it was an incredible performance. It certainly, just as a fan, it made me pretty emotional just watching that scene on 18. And seeing some of, did you get a chance to see some of the texts that Phil released after between his daughter and his wife, where the wife was texting the daughter saying things like, please make sure that Phil doesn't activate the calves and hit any more bombs. All he has to do is par out to beat all of these guys. And they released all those texts, and it was awesome to see. I'm so happy for him.
I love the fact that Phil's so engaged with social media as well.
Yeah, he was tweeting up a storm on his private jet heading home.
Yeah, that's just it was just cool. Obviously I had no action on Phil, and I made my apology tour this morning, but you know what? I don't care. It was so amazing to watch, and I just loved every minute of it. And you know what? That's more important. That's bigger than all of us, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I love that. But you know what? We must go on. Golf never rests. And we're going to Colonial, and Berger, defending champion. I can't wait to hear you break down the course and then break down your key stats and your model. Let's go with this, man. What do you think about this course? It's a little contrast compared to last week, right?
Sure. It's definitely going to be a much different sight, not just on television, but how these guys are going to attack Colonial Country Club. It's a par 70. 7,209 yards. It's in Fort Worth, Texas. Bent grass greens. The rough it's pretty average here, not really anything crazy. The greens are quite small. They're only around 5,000 square feet on average, and the fairways are pretty narrow and tree lined. It's a classical golf course. This is one of the oldest PGA Tour events on tour. I believe they've been playing this event at Colonial since 1949 or something.
75 years.
75
years, yeah.
So it's a great old school classical golf course. And for me, stats wise, I'm putting a way heavier approach, a way heavier weight on approach than I normally do. I think that, strokes gained off the tee, stuff like that, distance, it's not really going to be as important at a course like Colonial because there's so many dog legs that really take driver out of your hand. Don't get me wrong. You can still hit driver on some of these holes, but there are a lot of holes where you don't necessarily need to hit driver. And in fact, the shape of the hole doesn't even really call for it. So I mean, I know we say this a lot, probably almost every week. You hear the term second shot golf course all the time, but Colonial truly is a second shot golf course.
I agree with that. And part of my model definitely has fairways hit, because I believe that's what's going to determine how good those second shots are in. And so I'm off. I'm like you. I'm off distance completely. I'm all about accuracy this week, and so that's kind of where I'm at. But
absolutely, and I think you're on the right track with fairways gained as well. You do need to position yourself. A couple of the other stats that I'm looking at this week, par 4 scoring on some of these shorter to mid-length holes, like 10 of Colonial's holes are between 350 and 450 yards. So like last week at Kiowa, where you've got like 8 holes that are over 450 yards and a couple that are over 500 in terms of the par 4s, there's barely any of them this week at Colonial. I think there's only 2 holes on the entire course that are above 450 yards. So you're really going to want to look at some of those guys that dominate those shorter par 4s. That's really where all the scoring is going to be done. Par 3s and par 5s on this course, I wasn't really able to find too much. There's only 2 par 5s on the entire course. One is incredibly easy, and the other one is like a 3-shot hole for everyone. So I wouldn't really be looking too much at par 5 scoring or par 3 scoring, because the par 3s, they're very evenly distributed. Like they're not all in the same range. I think they're almost all 15 yards spread apart. So you really want to be looking at those guys that crush those medium length to short par 4s.
Totally agree with that. Are you also looking at that 400 to 450 range?
Yes, 400. Did I not say that? Sorry, 300.
Well, you said 350 to 400. You may have. I'm
yeah.
Just, yeah.
350 to 400 and 400 to 450. Absolutely. If you combine those two ranges together, I believe 10 of the par 4s on this course are 10 of the 12 on the entire course are between 350 and 450.
All right. Are you looking at scrambling or around the green?
Not as much. I mean, I'm always going to weigh all of the 4 key metrics in my model just as a base, but I only have around the green as 5% this week. Like I said, if you look at the top 10 finishers, let me see, I have this here. Yeah. Even more so than I expected. So top 10 finishers have gained 1.02 strokes gain on approach. That's over double what they've gained off the tee and over 4 times what they've gained around the green. So what that tells me is you don't need to have an amazing short game to win here at Colonial or finish strongly at Colonial. Of course, it doesn't hurt, it definitely helps. But what I tend to really try and look at is I look at, okay, what is the pathway to success here? What of the guys that have fared well here? What have they done? And it's not like any of them are really blitzing the field in around the green. They're blitzing the field in approach and putting. So it's not something that I would recommend putting more than like 5% in your models.
So speaking of putting, what kind of percentage are you looking at for that? Even though it's, obviously it's bent greens.
Yeah, so I think putting is going to be really important this week. From all the research that I've done, the 2 basic formulas to success at Colonial is you either have to be completely dialed in with your approaches and hit basically every approach shot to like 5 feet, or you have to make a ton of 15-footers. So putting is important to me. I've learned my lesson not weighing putting in models. I will now weigh putting in models. If you completely ignore putting whatsoever in your models, you're going to run into guys like Doug Gim at the top every single time. You have to guard against that a little bit and look at some of these guys that are rolling a hot putter recently. Of course, it is the most volatile stat, so I'm never going to weigh more than like 15%. But, there is something to be said for guys that are coming in with a hot putter. And of course, strokes gained putting on bent grass greens as well is something you want to look at. I tend to look at like last 24 rounds average, how they've done on bent grass greens. And also if they've performed historically well at other places that feature bent grass greens. Like if they've putted well at the Masters are bent grass greens. There's a bunch of other courses that are bent grass greens. So might be something to look at if players have performed well on that surface.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, because last week I saw a lot of people that they pretty much discarded putting because of the surface. And this week it's totally the opposite.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't discard it this week. Like if somebody's a bad bent grass putter, I don't think it's like a strong enough reason to like just actively fade them if bent grass is their worst surface, but it's definitely important to look at.
Yeah, like a guy like Charlie Hoffman.
Sure. I believe he is. Are you looking at last 24 on Bentgrass? He's a little below average, but
Yeah.
you have to be careful with some of that stuff because, like, for example, Charlie Hoffman's a guy who's played really well at the Masters before, and those stats aren't going to show up in Fantasy National. That was kind of the drum that I was banging last week with Victor Hovland. I was like, you guys have to be careful with Victor Hovland in your models. He had two of the worst rounds of his professional career on courses that aren't going to show up in your models. So I would say yes with Charlie Hoffman. It's something to be concerned about, but also look at places like Augusta and stuff like that, because those aren't always going to show up in the models.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And so, anyway, so it sounds like you got your model. I'm sorry I missed your pod on yesterday. You put out yesterday, but let's get into it, man. Let's start talking about your plays, and then I'm going to throw some players out there, and we'll talk about those. But before we even talk about your favorite plays, let's talk a little bit. We were texting back and forth during the PGA, and I think I was crying about how bad I was doing. And you basically said, you get a lot of private messages and a lot of DMs from people, and everybody's all about the outright. Everybody likes to bet the outright. You take a pretty smooth, balanced approach on outrights, top 20s, top 40s. Can you talk a little bit about how you break down your weekly regiment of betting on golf?
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, picking winners is not something I'm interested in doing. It's not the business it's not how I'm trying to pay my bills. If I hit one, that's awesome. It's a bonus.
Right.
I do not expect to hit one. If I go an entire year of the PGA season without hitting one outright, it is zero skin off my back whatsoever. If I hit one, that's great. It's a bonus, but it's not something that's going to positively or negatively really ever affect my week. And that basically all just comes down to being smart with your unit sizes, right? So like what I'll basically do is I'll basically pick 5 players to win on a given week and put a total of 1 unit on that. Right. And so if all my five guys lose, I lose a total of 1 unit. Now, the majority of all of my units, they're being distributed into matchups, into the finishing position market. And that's my bread and butter. That's where I'm making the majority of my money on a week-to-week basis is in that top 40 market, that top 20 market, and the matchup markets. To put things in context, a regular matchup for me, I'll put a unit on, which is the exact same amount that I have on my 5 outrights combined. So I treat not having any of my outrights win as just losing what is one matchup, right? And over the course of a tournament, I'll usually have like probably 8 to 12 units in play pre-tournament. And then maybe if I see some opportunities on the board, I will bet some round 3 matchups or some round 4 matchups as well. So to put that in perspective, I'm risking around like 12 to 16 units per week, and losing my outrights, that only accounts for 1 unit. It's tiny, tiny fraction of what I'm looking at with how I'm betting golf on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and I saw a breakdown of that that showed you actually had a profitable week this week, and on Twitter. And remind everybody where to find you on Twitter, and remind everybody to find your show and your website.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate that. I'm ADP Lack Sports on Twitter. You can follow me there. I tweet out a bunch of stats, all my plays, all the links to my podcasts and my articles and stuff like that. And then pickthepup.com as well for my articles and my podcasts, and Pick the Pup Golf Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I drop episodes every Sunday afternoon. And then on Tuesday mornings, I just recorded my Tuesday show with a buddy. So that'll drop tomorrow morning. It's a great show. So check out pickthepup.com for my article and on all wherever you get your podcasts.
Speaking of your buddy from last week, how much fun did he have on that course?
Are you talking?
Talking about the guy you had boots on the ground. You had a buddy of yours that was there.
Oh yeah, he loved it. I was so bummed because I felt so bad because I promised that he was going to come on the show he was going to do like a real boots on the ground podcast.
Right.
I tried to, and he had to cancel on me. He's actually he's in business school at the University of Virginia, and apparently they're graduating that, like they were graduating that next week. So he couldn't make it on the show, but he did. We were talking about Kiowa the whole week, and he gave me some information that I tweeted out. I didn't think any of it was groundbreaking by any means, but it was all kind of stuff that we expected, but he absolutely loved it and had such a great time. I don't think that he ended up staying on Sunday to watch Phil because UVA Business School had to graduate that weekend. His graduation was on Saturday, so he only watched the practice rounds and I think Thursday.
Well, it was an epic victory, and he missed out on that. At least he could say he was there for that week, just like I was there a couple years ago when Tiger won the Masters.
You were there for that?
Oh yeah, I was there, and so that was amazing. I still got all kinds of stuff. It was insane, and so yeah, I was very fortunate. That was my second time there, and the first time I was there was when Vijay Singh won the thing, and so.
Wow. I'm so jealous. I've never been to Augusta. I've been lucky enough to go to a couple US Opens and a couple PGA championships. I went to Pebble when Gary Woodland won in 2019, and I've been to a couple PGAs as well. I went to the US Open at Pinehurst, but Augusta, I mean, yeah. I'm a course architecture nerd as well. Like I just love golf courses. I've been playing golf my whole life and I just love golf courses. I try and play Golf Digest Top 100 and talk architecture stuff with the Golf Digest guys all the time. I just want to see Augusta in person so badly. I'm so jealous. That's awesome.
Well, you'll get there. And about 17 miles north of there, right across the border, is a ultra private club called Sage Valley.
I know it. I used to do the course database stuff for Golf Digest. I know I know all the courses.
It's cut out of the same ground as the Masters, and it looks just like it. They got all the caddies wearing the white jumpsuits, and I played that course, and it was spectacular. We got rained out after 8 holes, but it was unbelievable. And so, but anyway, let's get to the picks, man. That's what we're here for. So let's talk about your outrights first. Everybody digs the long ball. They want to hear the outrights. So do you have a real confident play this week like you did last week?
Yeah, I like Justin Thomas in this spot. And I'm more of a contrarian better than I think most. I think most people will off the bat be gravitating to someone like Jordan Spieth, even Colin Morikawa I've seen some love for, which I totally understand. I get it completely. Here's my case for Thomas, and I think you're going to have to make a decision on where you land in terms of the fatigue factor at Kiowa. To me personally, I think it matters. I understand the argument that it doesn't, but I'm looking at all of these players at the top of the board, and there's one player that got out of that shit show. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah.
There's one player that got out of there on Friday night, right? Every single one of those players are grinding over 4-footers in the wind for 30th place, logging 12,000 steps a day on an 8,000-yard course. And then they have this quick turnaround and they're asked to go play Colonial. Justin Thomas, he got out of there on Friday night. He's spending his Sunday on the couch tweeting at Phil Mickelson watching golf. I think he's ready to go. I think he's fired up. I think he's a killer. I think there's a lot of narratives going around about the fact that he hasn't really done much since his Players win. And to me, that's just false. Like, you look at what he's done since he won the Players. He just hasn't been putting well. Like he finished 21st at the Masters, a tournament that he was in prime position to win until the weather delay. And someone body snatched him after the weather delay, and he just gave it all up on that one hole. And then he finishes 13th at the Valspar, losing 6 strokes putting. That's a tournament he wins if he resembles even close to a neutral putter. And now Justin Thomas sucks. Like I don't get it. He's 14-1. He goes off at 11-1 in majors. I don't understand it whatsoever. Yeah. If Justin Thomas makes that cut last week, you got to assume he's at least co-favorites with Spieth, right? He's the number 2 ranked player in the world.
Yep. He's number 1 in my model this week. And in Tony Finau's number 2, but I'm with you all the way, man. I like that play and I like the number. I love the number. You just made a really good point. In majors, he's 11-1, but yet here he is 14.
Yeah. And I mean, Listen, I think that like I am personally of the belief that players who either did not play Kiowa last week or got out of there on Friday are at an advantage of the guys that stayed there 4 rounds, right? Think about a guy like Colin Morikawa. He's a 24-year-old kid. He's the defending PGA champion. Forget the 8,000-yard long walk. Think about all those media commitments that he had to deal with, right? Like just watch 20 minutes of Jordan Spieth's round, right? It's a grind. And you got to read some of the quotes too. I know that I'm a big numbers guy, right? And like a lot of people are coming here for my numbers, but you have to think outside of the box with some of these situations, right? Like you have, I try and read all of the media sessions. I try and read all of the quotes that players are saying to try and get a sense of this. And the one constant through line that I heard from Kiowa Island, every single player said it is, this place took a lot out of me. And you don't hear them say that every week, right? But every single player was like, this place took a lot out of me. It was a grind. It tested every part of you, physically, emotionally. It's a long walk. It's a major championship, media commitments, all those things. It's not nothing, right? And I look at a guy like JT who's sitting on his couch watching history get made. These guys care. He cares. Like those arguments. Some people say like players like Justin Thomas, they don't care if they finish 8th or they miss the cut. That's baloney. That's
Kevin Kistner. That's Kevin Kistner.
Yeah, JT cares. He wanted to be playing, right? And I think he's going to come out strong. I think it's a good number on him. He would be the person that I lean towards at the top.
I love it. You just talked me into it. That's a valid point. That's a point I haven't heard yet. And so I'm going in on Justin. I have every reason to now, but you just solidified it. But anyway, who else you like in an outright? Let's go through them.
Yeah, and I may take some flack for this one, but I really do think Tony Finau sets up really well here.
Nice.
Yeah, I haven't bet Tony Finau in a long time. In fact, the last time, I guess it hasn't been that long, but the last time that I bet Finau was at the Genesis. Now, it's close for me between Finau and Patrick Reed, actually. Oddly enough, I'm choosing between a guy that is like a prolific winner and a guy that never wins, oddly enough. Those both of them have the exact same odds pretty much. You can shop around a little bit. I'm seeing like a 23 on Finau and Reed at FanDuel right now. I think those are both great numbers. I like both of those players a lot, to be honest with you. I haven't made a strong decision yet on where I'm going to go to, but I can guarantee you that I will have something on one of those players. And right now I'm probably leaning towards Finau.
They are great numbers on FanDuel because you go over to DraftKings and they're both at 16.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So yeah, that FanDuel number, that's the book for those two guys for sure.
The thing about Finau is, and I think like he obviously gets a lot of flack by the backdoor nature of, his top 10s. Like he just finished in the top 10 again at Kiowa. Did you see him on TV once?
No, I don't think I did. I didn't realize you wouldn't even know he was playing.
Exactly. Well, that's a whole different discussion on CBS's coverage. That's probably another podcast, but I think Finau is one of the most well-rounded players on tour. And I tend to view outrights a little bit differently than some other people view outrights, right? Like I think it's a lot harder to quantify something like winning instinct, right? Like with a guy like Tony, he gets killed because he doesn't win. But the way that I view outrights, right, is this guy going to put himself in position on Sunday, right? Do all of his numbers suggest that he is somebody who can put himself in the mix on Sunday? What happens on Sunday? Does he drain enough putts, right? Like, are weird things going to happen? Absolutely. That stuff is completely out of my control. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen on a Sunday afternoon. What I think is not as hard to predict is who are the best players that are best positioned based on their numbers to put themselves in that position in a Sunday afternoon. And so I have, I'll probably get some flack if I do end up landing on Finau, and deservedly so. I've been playing golf my whole life and playing golf tournaments my whole life. So I do think that like the winning instinct stuff really does matter. It's just very hard for me to quantify. And I'm not going to necessarily lay off someone like Tony Finau just because he hasn't won. If he's showing me that he's consistently putting himself in position on Sunday, look, the law of averages, like if he continues to put himself in the mix, like it's going to work out for him one day. Like he's going to get the other end of that stick where one day everyone kind of collapses around him instead of makes the charge. And I think this is a great course for him.
You know, the only stat that scares me on him, I mean, because he's so good in all the other things, the only stat that scares me is his accuracy, his fairways gained. In this field, as a matter of fact, he's 115th in the last 24 rounds. But other than that, he's like inside the top 15 in like 7 of the key stats. And so, you know, I'm all over him this week. And so, you know, I'm happy to hear you say that, but definitely everything you're saying makes total sense. But anyway, so I'm happy with the Thomas and the Finau. What else you got?
So, you know, it's very rare for me to bet 2 guys under 25-1. And if that is the route that I'm going to go, I'm probably going to skip that middle range, right? Like if I'm going to bet a guy at 30, that's just the way that I like to do my units. If I'm going to bet a guy at 13 and a guy at 23, the next guy that I actually have is all the way up at 70. But I'm happy to talk about that mid range if there's anyone in that range.
We'll come back to that. Let's just get to your guys.
So I've bet Matt Wallace at 70-1, and
you love Wallace.
I do really like Wallace. I didn't end up having exposure to him at the PGA or at Quail Hollow, where people were very much all over him too. I think that Wallace, I think he checks a lot of the boxes for this course. You know, he's actually developed into one of the more consistent ball strikers on tour. Prior to the PGA, where he was still fine, he just didn't putt well. I'm willing to forgive him for that. You know, 18th at the API, 3rd at the Valero Texas Open, and 34th at the Masters, 6th at the Wells Fargo, 18th at the Heritage. And the thing that what I love about Wallace the most is that approach. It's exactly what I've talked about. I think there's a very simple way to handicap Colonial this week is just look at guys who are spiking in approach and putting. If they're not spiking in approach and putting, it's not that they can't win, but their pathway to victory is going to be so much harder than somebody that's spiking in approach and putting. And that's a really good way to do it if you're trying to find long shots at the bottom of the board too. And I look at what Wallace is doing right now. He's gained over 3 strokes on approach in 3 consecutive starts. He gained 9.3 strokes on approach in Texas. To put that in context, a lot of PGA Tour players go their entire career without sniffing a week where they gain 9.3 strokes on approach. This guy's good. He's really good. I know he's just kind of coming over for the Euro Tour. To be honest with you, I'm pretty good at projecting these odds. I usually guess them, and my numbers aren't very far from the book's numbers before they get put out. I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't have blinked if he was 40-1.
Wow. And he's 66?
Yeah, I got him at 70.
Yeah, let me scroll here. On DraftKings, he is 66. Yep, sure is. Right next to Siwoo Kim. And so, okay, so you got Thomas, you got Finau, you got Wallace, you got some other outrights?
I certainly do. I've got I also bet Emiliano Grillo at 75-1, and I'm going to take a guess that he is up there in your model.
Hold on one second. Let me see here. Yeah, he is. He's 13th.
Yeah, Grillo. Listen, he should be up there in your model. He's certainly up there in mine too. You know, he just fits the bill. I'm a little more squeamish on Grillo than I am on Wallace, but the reason that I pounced so early on Grillo is he actually opened at 75, and there were a lot of books that had him in the 40s, and I saw that number at 75 on FanDuel, and I grabbed it because he was priced at 40 in the 40s at other places. He's just another one of those guys. You'll see it. You'll see a theme with me, man, this week where I'm really just looking at great iron players. Right. And Grillo, I mean, this is the best he's ever hit the ball in his entire career. I mean, literally, he gained 7.5 strokes on approach at the PGA. That's the second best iron week of his entire career. It's actually the third time in his last 4 starts that he's gained 7 strokes on approach. He gained 7.5 at the PGA, 7.1 at the Wells Fargo, 7.1 at the Heritage. Those are 3 of his best 5 iron weeks in his entire career, and they've happened in his last 3 starts. So he's like, you have to ride a wave like that. He's literally never hit the ball better in his entire life. Now the question remains with Grillo, can he make enough putts to win a tournament? That's the problem. I mean, and look, there is some positive signs with his putting, right? Like he has been putting better. He's gained over 1 stroke putting in 3 of his last 4 starts. He gained 1.7 strokes putting at the Heritage, 3.4 at the Wells Fargo, and 1.3 at the PGA. So, you know, he is putting better than he normally does, right? So I think if you're going to handicap this course the way that I'm handicapping this course, it's really hard to look past Grillo.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm looking at it at my model right now, and it looks beautiful all the way across until, to your point, we hit that putting in last 24 rounds based on a 7% weight. He's 113 in this field in putting. So he get a few to drop, you know, he could be right there. I agree with you.
Farther down, keep going.
All right, let's go.
So now I'm deciding, this is not a bet that I have made. I'm deciding between a couple players in this range, but the person that I'm gravitating more to, and I probably like him more, I think he can win this tournament. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't end up betting him if I didn't, but he is going to be one of my strongest plays in the top 40 market. Anywhere around like plus 150 in the top 40 market, I will be all over that. And that's Matt Kuchar. And, you know, Matt Kuchar has been playing a lot better than I think people think. Again, he's another one of those guys that you have to be careful with the models. He obviously finished 3rd at the match play. That's not going to show up in any of your numbers on Fantasy National. So the guy finished 3rd in a WGC, and he's not getting any credit for that in the models. You know, he has the perfect skill set for this course. He's above average in approach, 29th in putting. So he's doing the 2 things that I care about the most. Those short par 4s that we keep talking about, Kuchar's amazing at those short par 4s. He's top 10 in both of those par 4 yardage ranges over his last 36 rounds. And his game's just coming around, like 3rd at the match play, 12th at the Valero. You know, he missed the cut at the Masters where he putted poorly, and then finished 18th at the Heritage, 17th at the Byron Nelson, which was a tough course for him. And then he missed the cut at the PGA where he putted absolutely terribly, right? Like Matt Kuchar finished 147th out of 156 players in strokes gained putting at the PGA Championship. Kuchar's never going to make that cut if he putts that poorly, right? And his numbers from the PGA Championship aren't going to be that great either because he's hitting a 4-iron on every single hole, right? Like that's not Matt Kuchar's jam. Matt Kuchar's jam is wedges and short irons, right? And so now you get him on a course where he's going to have a wedge in his hands half the time. He's one of the best players in the world in that. Still.
Yeah, I like that. And right now he's 66 outright. And top 20.
I saw an 85. Did those disappear?
Well, I'm on DraftKings.
Okay.
And so he probably does this. He's probably got a blend out there. So I definitely I see him at 66. That's who I primarily stick around with. But
I should probably pull up BetUS because they gave me a promo code and all that stuff too.
Nice.
So let me check out what they've got for him. But yeah, I mean, listen, I like Kuchar at 70. You know, I like him at 85 more.
Yes.
I feel very strongly about him though for like top 20 and top 40. I think he's going to play well this week. He's played Colonial really well over his career.
Yeah. Speaking of top 20, DraftKings has him top 20. Where is he? Oh, plus 200.
I like that. Absolutely.
I do too.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah.
I like that one. Do you ever play round one, first round leader?
I don't. It's not for me. It's just too volatile of a market for me to have any interest in. I'm a very conservative golf bettor. I like I said, like one total unit on an outright is the craziest I'm going to bet. Like I will bet, I'll bet some guys over 100 to 1 to win a tournament and put a fraction of a unit on that. That's about as risky as I'll get. The first round later, I just haven't met somebody who wins at it long term. I'm sure there are people that win it at long term, and some of my friends I've seen them cash first round later tickets this year, but it's very difficult for me to justify entering a marketplace where I'm not so sure if there is any method for me to have like a legitimate edge.
I got you. That makes sense. Hey, makes a lot of sense.
If you want, if you want first round leader bets, I can give you guys.
Right. No, I tend to stay away from also, but I also know some guys that actually do pretty darn good with it.
Really?
And so, I mean,
I believe it.
Some people really like to look at those things and the data's out there. And so I just find it interesting. I just didn't know if that was a part of your thing or not. But anyway, I want to talk about some of the players that you didn't talk about that are higher up. And so the first one I want to talk about is the one that seems to be the chalk, 10-1, Jordan Spieth. Talk about Jordan Spieth.
I like Jordan Spieth this week a lot. He is not somebody I'm looking to fade whatsoever. I think he is probably the easiest player to make a case for this week. He's somebody that I might end up using in one and done. Something interesting about Spieth, he gained 1.6 strokes off the tee at Kiawah. That's actually his best off the tee week in this entire run where he kind of turned the game around. He hasn't gained that many strokes off the tee since the 2019 British Open. So he's really starting to turn the driver around. And the reason that he didn't play that well at Kiawah, he hit the ball fine. He didn't hit the ball great. But the real reason why he struggled at Kiawah is because he lost 2.2 strokes putting. Now, I don't think you're going to make a lot of money long-term betting on Jordan Spieth to continue to lose strokes putting. I would be shocked if he doesn't turn it in the other direction this week. He's lost strokes putting twice this entire year. And in the start directly after, he gained 4.1 and 5.7 strokes putting. Those are like big numbers. So he usually follows up a bad putting week with like an amazing one. The problem with Spieth is, if I'm betting somebody at 10-1, and maybe I'm not being fair here because I told you I have interest in somebody at 14-1, and that's not that much of a difference. Right. But if I'm betting on somebody at 10-1, like I want to be having visions of them holding that trophy in my sleep. Like I want to be so confident in that player that he is going to win this tournament. And, if I can get JT, who I still think, I know the Spieth guys will come for me. I still think JT's a better golfer than Jordan Spieth. Just overall, I think he's better from all of the golf that I watch. If I can get a rested, a motivated Justin Thomas at 4 points lower than Jordan Spieth, I'm going to take that 10 times out of 10. Spieth is awesome. I have no interest in fading him. In fact, if you want to bet him at 10-1 and start your card that way and then kind of skip out on like that middle range, I don't think you're crazy.
Gotcha. All right. He lipped out a 4-footer last year, Colin Morikawa, and he's right there at 14-1 too. What are your thoughts on Morikawa this year? And do you think he can contend? I mean, obviously that number, they all think he can contend. But what are your thoughts?
Morikawa terrifies me. Like I like all of those guys. I like Spieth, I like JT, and I like Morikawa, and it's pretty close between those two. As soon as I saw between those three, as soon as I saw the odds come out, I was like, I have a strong feeling that I'm going to bet one of these guys. I ultimately landed on JT, but I think the margins are pretty slim, right? Like everything I've talked about stat-wise, this is an absolutely perfect course for Colin Morikawa, right? And obviously that's evidenced by the fact that he lost in a playoff in his first appearance here last year. He has the perfect skill set for Colonial. He is first in proximity from 175 to 200, first in proximity from 125 to 150, 10th from 150. I can give you a million stats on Morikawa. He is, along with JT, the best iron player in the world. The question remains with Morikawa always, can he make enough putts to win this tournament? It depends. I don't think Morikawa is a bad putter. Morikawa is a volatile putter. There's a huge difference. A bad putter is somebody like Doug Gim or Sergio Garcia that consistently loses strokes putting every week. And on their good weeks, they'll barely gain strokes putting. A volatile putter is somebody like Colin Morikawa that loses strokes putting often, but he's also capable of gaining a lot of strokes sometimes, right? And so I have a lot of people that I've already talked to that are really high on Colin Morikawa. As somebody that's probably going to bet JT at similar odds, he is the one guy that terrifies me. It's those three guys at the top that I think are really strong. And I actually think a lot of these guys a little bit farther down. I think those guys don't scare me as much. I think some of those odds are a little inflated, actually. Those are the guys I would fade.
Okay. I'm going to tell you, I have a guy in my model that's 4th overall.
Answer?
Nope.
I just got to say, be careful with Answer.
No, I'm not looking at Answer this week. I think his number's way too high.
Yeah.
I'm with
you. I'm with you on that one.
At that number, I'm not fooling with him. He hadn't shown me. I mean, I love his potential. I love his iron play. You know, he hits fairways. Oh my God, he hits fairways. But I'm looking at Joaquin Niemann.
Oh, that's a great pick.
Yeah, he's third in tee to green in this field. He's third off the tee. He's 5th in 400 to 450 par 4 scoring. He's 12th in approach. I mean, he's all lined up right there. And for those that play DraftKings, he's only $9,300. And so, but he popped off at 4th, and I just wanted to see what you thought about him.
Niemann's an awesome player. I've bet him, I believe, 2 times in the last 3 weeks. We talked about him last week on the PGA show. I bet him at the PGA Championship at 70 to 1. He looked great for a second there. He entered the final round, I think only 4 strokes back of the lead and in 6th or 7th place. And then he just completely imploded on Sunday and finished like 30th. Niemann's a great player. I just couldn't fit him. But this is absolutely a course that he can play well on, right? Like, he's been putting a lot better. He makes a ton of birdies. He gives himself a ton of opportunities as well. He's 8th in opportunities gained, 5th in par 4 scoring on 350 to 400 yards. So he really knows how to take advantage of those shorter par 4s. He's really good at shaping the ball, right? Like, a lot of people talk about how he is good in the wind, which is true, but he's also quite good just shaping his shots in general. And I think kind of that low little stinger that he likes to hit should suit him really well around Colonial, kind of shaping it around some of those dog legs. So I love the pick. You can't bet everyone.
No, but at 25 to 1, when he pops off in the top 4, that makes it a pretty easy play for me.
I'm seeing 30s.
Yeah, I think DraftKings is really low this week, and so I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to shop the books.
Use promo code Pick the Pup on BetUS.
You know what? Plug that again.
So for a 125% bonus on all sports, you can use promo code Pick the Pup. Just same thing as my golf show. It made the promo code super easy for you. So Pick the Pup for BetUS, 125% bonus. It's a legal sports book that's legal in all 50 states. And yeah, check out their odds. They have really good odds sometimes. I think that they actually might be one that's hanging a 30 on Niemann. I can get back to you on that one. And again, if you use that promo code, you get a bonus on your first deposit.
Everybody watching, gosh, take advantage of that deal right there, right now. I mean, obviously, every number that he's repeating is bigger than the DraftKings number this week, and so I'm definitely going to have to get on there myself. 5 points is 5 points, right?
It makes a difference long term. It makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's about all the outrights. I did have one more name I wanted to throw out there, and then we'll start talking about some of these other ones. And that was, and this is, I'm almost don't even want to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up. Harry Varner III.
I love him this week.
Yeah, he's right there in my. I mean, it's crazy, but he's right there, especially you know, the par four 350 to 400 range. He's top 15. He's top 15 in tee to green. He's 22 in approach. He's 12th off the tee. No, he's not 12th off the tee. He's 39th, but he doesn't have one blow up category in my model this week. His worst category is putting, and he's still 65th. And so for his number, I mean, I like him.
I love Varner. I will have some exposure to him. I haven't figured out how yet, but I'm with you. He ranks top 70 in literally every single metric that I'm looking at. I just recorded a show with my friend Patrick McDonald, who's a writer at NBC Sports Edge, and we talked a lot about him. Yeah, great guy. He's on Varner too. We talked a lot about him. He's one of those guys that I'm kind of deciding between in the outright market between him and Kuchar, because they're both at kind of similar numbers. In fact, Varner's a better number. I probably would lean Varner in like a top 20 or a top 40 cents, but he checks a lot of boxes for me. He's ranked 7th in opportunities gained, so he gives himself a ton of birdie looks. And he's great on these shorter courses, right? Like, I think Harbortown's a really great comp course. Obviously, he finished 2nd there. That's another course where irons and putting is key. Varner's actually one of only 14 players in this entire field to gain over 1 stroke ball striking over his last 24 rounds on courses under 7,200 yards. So you really want to look at Varner on kind of these shorter courses like Colonial, like Harbortown, like Sedgefield. He tends to play really well here.
Yeah, he's 90 to 1 outright, and he's 250. He's plus 250 for a top 20.
Love it.
And I really like that 250 top 20 number. And so I like the 90 to 1 number too. So, but yeah, that's one of the other ones I really wanted to really get your feeling on, and I appreciate that. What are some other top 20s or even top 40s that you're looking at?
I mean, how ugly do you want to get here? Because I
want to give the people something that they're not expecting. And,
okay. Well, a guy that I wouldn't give out anyone on the show that I'm not going to put my own money behind and put a ton of research and information to. So when I say ugly, I say that kind of tongue in cheek. I do the best finding some of these guys that are like 200 to 1 to win the golf tournament, but they're like plus 300 to finish in the top 40 market. That's how I make the majority of my money betting golf. So I do have 2 guys that I'm really looking at. One of them is Tom Hoge. Again, I'll keep it simple with Tom Hoge. He pops in the 2 categories that I care about the most. He's 13th in this field in strokes gained approach, 42nd in opportunities gained. He's top 25 in all of the proximity distances that I'm looking at. We didn't really get a chance to talk about this at the top, but 65% of Colonial's approaches come from 125 to 200 yards. Like last week, we talked about long irons a ton. This week, it's a little bit of a different game. You want to be dialed in that range from 125 to 200, which for a pro is anything from like a gap wedge to a 7 iron. Tom Hoge is awesome in that yardage range, and he's 200 to 1. I haven't looked at his finishing position numbers yet. FanDuel usually drops those kind of late on Monday night, but I'm sure that you can get a pretty fat price on him to finish in the top 20 or the top 40
400
market. Yeah, I love that. I think he's severely undervalued. He's got great experience at Colonial. He's gone 17th, 40th, 42nd. He missed a cut last year, but keep in mind that missed cut, it was the first week after a giant COVID layoff, right? And it was in an absolutely stacked field. It was like a WGC field. And he did so losing 5 strokes putting. I'm very confident that he can, turn that around with the putter this week. And I know the irons will show up. So I really like Tom Hoge.
Hey, we got a comment from the audience with Luke List. What are your thoughts on Luke List before we go to your second top 20 guy?
He wasn't somebody that had my attention right off the bat. I can do a quick scan on some of the stuff I have for him. I have him about, he's not like a negative play for me, but he's not somebody that is popping as value for me. He's fine. I think the issue just in a vacuum quickly, because I haven't done a ton of Luke List. In a vacuum, my issue with Luke List is that his biggest weapon is his driver. And
Yep.
I just don't think that's going to be that important at Colonial. And putting, he's 99th in strokes gained putting. I'm kind of looking at the opposite skill set. I'm looking at guys that pop on approach and pop with their putting, and Luke Less he's more of a off the tee guy.
Yep. Yep. I agree. I do like Luke List as a player, but I'm kind of with you on this one. Who's that other guy besides Tom Hoge you were eyeballing?
I really like Camilo Villegas this week.
Wow.
Yeah. In the top 40 market, I don't think he can win. You can find him at 250 to 1 to win, but I really like Camilo Villegas in the top 40 market. I think you'll get a pretty good price on him. Listen, I understand that you're throwing some darts in this range, but what I try and do is I try and really dig into the numbers and find if there is some form of a mistake going on here. And I really do think that Camilo Villegas is mispriced based on what he's doing right now. He ranks 22nd in this field in strokes gain approach. He's 36 in birdies or better gain. He's 39th in opportunities gain. And he's just coming off a week where he gained 4.9 strokes on approach and 3.1 strokes putting, where he finished 11th at the Valspar. Like, Camilo's been actually playing really good golf, and he's been doing it on these same kind of par 70, par 71 tracks where approach and putting is the name of the game. You know, he finished 8th at PGA National, Harbor Town, Innisbrook, all those courses that he's finishing top 25 at. That's the same formula this week at Colonial. It's irons and putting. And how has Camilo been getting his top 25s? Irons and putting. Every time Camilo has played well recently, it's because he's gaining on approach and he's gaining with the flat stick. That is the formula here for success at Colonial. And if Camilo keeps that up, I think that he will easily find himself in the top 40 or top 20 if you want to get more.
I like his top 20 number at 600.
Love it.
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to a couple. If you don't have any, let me know. Have you started looking at the pairing matchups?
No, I haven't looked at the pairing matchups, but I'm not sure if they been released yet. But I can tell you right
not the pairings, but yeah, the matchups.
Yeah, no, I follow. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to look at them yet, just because I've gone from show to show this afternoon. But I'm probably looking to target like the same amount, the same types, the same players that I've already talked about before. Like, I'm looking to find matchups with Kuchar. You know, like, for example, if I don't end up getting there with Patrick Reed, somebody that if I can get like a Patrick Reed over Scotty Scheffler or Abraham Answer matchup, I would take that all day. Right. You know, Justin Rose is somebody else that I'd be looking to pick on. I think he's a little bit overvalued right now. He gained 11 strokes putting at the PGA Championship. Like, you got to look at those numbers. That's a lot of smoke and mirrors for this guy to be 35 to 1 now. Basically, all he's shown us over the last year is that he occasionally shows up at majors, right? Like, he plays a regular tour event, he either misses the cut or withdraws. So having him at 35 to 1, like, if you can find a matchup with Neiman, who's at similar odds or something like that, I'd look at that. But no, I haven't looked at the matchups yet. I will look at that far more in depth tomorrow, and then I'll post all my plays on Twitter.
Sounds good. Do you ever mess around with like winning margin props or like one stroke, 2 stroke?
I don't think those are exploitable markets, but I'm very conservative in the way that I bet golf.
Right.
Like, I'm very conservative, and I think like kind of all those exotic props, they're fun, but you're not going to hear too many pro bettors talking about them.
I know Feinberg likes that Hovland -3, doesn't he?
He does. There's no talking him out of stuff like that. It's just not. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
You know what? We should have him on next week.
Absolutely.
We should bring him in and run amok a little bit.
Absolutely.
That would be a lot of fun.
That'd be fun.
Well, hey, this has been amazing. This is awesome. I know it's draining when you're grinding and you got the PG on at the same time, and in the pace that you're able to put out content and put out podcast and write articles and do all the things you're doing. It's just damn impressive, Andy. And I'm just honored that you come on the show, and I look forward to doing this more often with you. Any final thoughts? Tell everybody again where to find you, and give them that promo code again.
Yeah. So, ADP Lack Sports on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. Again, like, I always answer questions. you can always reach out and Pick the Pup Golf Show on Apple Podcasts. New episode dropping tomorrow. My article where I break down all of the numbers and go in depth with all of my outrights, that should be posted on Wednesday morning as well. And then, yeah, I actually have 2 promo codes to give you. I've got BetUS, where promo code Pick the Pup, and you can get 125% bonus on your first deposit. It's a great legal sports book that you can use online, legal in all 50 states. And then Fanshare Sports too. Fanshare Sports is another great company that I work with. Promo code Pick the Pup. It's the exact same one. It's very easy for you. My promo codes for any companies that I work with, they're always going to be Pick the Pup. And Fanshare Sports is a great data website. I think it is I kind of dabble in DFS, right? I'm more of a betting guy, but for DFS ownership projections, like Fanshare is the place, in my opinion. And they've got a bunch of really cool tools that you can use, but they are the place for ownership projections. Some of the guys that are big DFS guys and serious DFS guys that know way more about DFS than I do, they turn me on to Fanshare Sports, and they use Fanshare Sports. So again, promo code Pick the Pup to get 20% off on Fanshare Sports.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to check that out. I will put a small shameless plug in for our buddy Guru. When he puts out his model on Wednesday, he's been pretty darn good at his projected ownerships as well. And that's a model that everyone has access to on Wednesday afternoons on hammercast.com. And we'll be tweeting that information out too. But his model's pretty cool. I don't know if you've had a chance to check that out.
I absolutely will. I don't play as much DFS as I would like because I get so bogged down in the weeds with my betting stuff. But like, I talk to a ton of people that are super into DFS, and so I'm very familiar with like the community, and I just don't. It's hard to get more exposure down.
Yep, I get it. Well, Andy, this has been a great show. We're gonna get you out of here, and we look forward to keeping up with you via text and DM throughout the week, and we look forward to next week. I'm gonna shoot a message out to Finey, see if he'll come on next week. That'll be
absolutely. I'd
awesome.
Love that.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next week. Good luck this week with all your bets, man. We really appreciate you.
Talk soon, man. Cheers.
All right, man.
Did you get all that? If not, make sure you head over to hammercast.com, subscribe, and join the Hammer Nation.